Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Welcome, my friends, to another deep dive with an expert episode of the Modern Leadership Podcast. How are you doing today? I gotta tell you, it feels good to have the microphone plugged in, the headphones on, and be here today. I got up early to go to work, got all excited about this episode, got to my office, and dope, the door was locked up. I guess I beat the security guard. So I started my day working from the car, but it's all good because in life and work, in goal setting and achievement, you're gonna face bumps. There are gonna be obstacles that you're gonna have to overcome, and sometimes you just gotta roll with it. So here we are. I'm excited to introduce a good friend of mine who you are gonna love, Mala Grewal. Now, if you're a 2Xer listening to podcasts at 2X speed, you're gonna wanna slow it down for this episode because Mala is awesome, and once she gets going, look out. She talks fast, she drops value bombs in every sentence. Mala is the founder of Talent Catalyst, a leadership development company focused on increasing productivity of younger generations. Think Millennials. She began her career helping naval officers with theirs. Careers, that is, as well as coaching executives on career transition and development. After working with the U.S. Navy, she joined Universal Weather and Aviation, a leading aviation company, and has since been a sought-after speaker, influencer, and change management leader with companies like Franklin Covey, Partners in Leadership, General Assembly, and Inside Out Development, a few names you've probably heard of. So, without further ado, Mala, so great to steal a few minutes of your time. How are you today?
Doing great, Jake. Sorry to hear about your door being locked.
Well, you know, sometimes that happens and you get there and you see the red light on the door and you say, I guess I got to wait a couple more minutes. But it's all good because we are going to sit down and talk here about influence. And I love this idea of the talent catalyst. But before we jump into that, what did I miss in this intro by way of who is Mala?
Well, thanks for having me, Jake. I think it's good to hear you being so optimistic after a Monday morning bump. So I think we could all thrive, aspire to be as optimistic as you about it. Jake. I live in New York City. I'm originally from San Francisco. Live in Manhattan. Love New York City. And always have. I think the energy and the people here are an inspiration to me on a daily basis, in spite of all the challenges that New York brings as well. I moved here right out of undergrad to work in advertising. So I got my first internship at Young and Rubicam on Madison Avenue, working on Pepperidge Farm goldfish at the time when the colored goldfish were being officially launched. So you're welcome for that invention. And then from there, went to Ogilvy. Spent some time at Merkley and Partners working on Arby's. At Ogilvy, I worked on IBM on the server account before I knew what servers were, which is kind of embarrassing. And then moved over to DDB, worked on Subaru, and then spent a few more years in advertising on the West Coast in San Diego, working on some hospitality accounts and food accounts. And then started going to grad school to study my favorite product of all time, which would be human beings and life development. And that's kind of where my journey's taken me into leadership development and learning and development. So,
well, it's awesome. Did you know kind of from a young age that you wanted to go into speaking? Like I know for myself, I grew up listening to Zig Ziglar. I'm sure you probably haven't heard of him. You're way too young.
No, I have. Yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing. He's a classic. Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to be a speaker, but how about you?
I spent a lot of time on a stage growing up as a kid. I did musical theater since I can remember, since I was about 5 or 6. So it was always a comfortable place for me. But I never know. In college, speaker to me, the route that showed up for me was broadcast journalism. So that I took, that I considered. So the camera felt comfortable, right? But I never thought, oh yeah, I want to be a speaker growing up. No, I thought more I want to be an actress or a Broadway star. And then I started getting practical and thought, well, maybe broadcast journalism is more realistic.
And so is that what you studied in undergrad, broadcasting? How'd you get into advertising?
No, I ended up, I broadcast journalism falls into the School of Communications and Marketing. So I considered broadcast journalism and just looked at all the all the dues you have to pay to get into the industry and then where you land. And I decided that it probably wasn't the best fit for me. In full transparency, just moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then making $20,000 a year was a hard pill to swallow for me, and for a number of reasons. And so then I started looking in the lifestyle. I think is what diverted me. And so then I started looking into advertising and thought it would lead me to New York. And I love brands and I love products. I love telling a story. And so advertising was a really great fit.
Well, and now you end up, back right after undergrad, you end up on Madison Avenue, which is awesome. I mean, this is like the top of the game. But when you got there, was it kind of a letdown? I mean, were you bringing coffee or what were you doing?
Yeah, I remember researching. So you always have to do a competitive analysis for any major account that you're working on. And so with Pepperidge Farm, I was looking up, I was finding print ads from their competitors and TV spots from their competitors and spent a lot of time looking through archives and files and whatnot. So that wasn't glamorous at all. And then researching different chicken companies. I remember that. And there's different companies on the West Coast and the East Coast. So some of like the major East Coast brands I'd never heard of. So I remember getting teased for not knowing what Purdue chicken was. So yeah, just a lot of filing, a lot of research, things like that. No, it wasn't glamorous, but at the same time, I'm on Madison Avenue, like working at Y&R, one of the like top 10 firms in the world. So and the people and the culture of advertising was always exciting. The people are always really fun. So I think of advertising agencies as an extension of an undergraduate campus in a lot of ways. So it was a nice transition out of college into work because there wasn't this huge gap in a daily experience for me.
And so there's this television show that's all about advertising in New York City, kind of the old style advertising. And when you got into advertising, was it kind of like that? I mean, I'm trying to think of the name of this television show, totally famous.
Mad Men?
Yeah, Mad Men. Were you having a Mad Men experience?
Well, see, I didn't know what Mad Men was yet, right? And so because Mad Men, rolled out a decade later, I think, so, or maybe 6-8 years later. So when I watched Mad Men, the parts that I did watch of it were right on brand. Absolutely. The industry has not changed much. For better or for worse, it really hasn't. Like it's still like 1960s David Ogilvy, Don Draper, there's a lot of things that are still alive and well, a lot of things that are still alive and not well. And then, just kind of how the industry views the world and views talent is I think, pretty similar, though there's some major evolution. I would be doing it a disservice to say that things haven't shifted or changed. They have. But yeah, the whole thing, the suits, the men, the women, the roles have changed, certainly, the gender roles. But yeah, it's still kind of a similar energy, I would say.
Well, so now, Mala, you started out in San Francisco, then you went all the way across the country and did some time in New York. Then you went all the way back across the country to do some San Diego time, which is awesome. Now you're back in New York and you're doing this thing, this Talent Catalyst. So give us a little background of what Talent Catalyst is and how you came up with this idea, saw this need that needed to be scratched.
Yeah. Well, who we are today is we're a learning and development company, and we train leaders, which was paralleling with your intro there. But essentially, like we make work for today's workforce, because when work works, life works. So essentially, that brings me back to where this all began. So back in 2010, 2011, I began coaching folks, and I would get phone calls that sounded like this. People would say, well, I've been in advertising, or I've been working at the bank for 3 to 4 years now, or 2 to 3 years now, and I'm working 70. I'm in New York. I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and I kind of see where this is going now. I see the trajectory, and I'm just not sure I want to do this for 50 or 60 hours a week anymore. And I don't know who to talk to about it, right? Like I can't talk to I'm not going to talk to HR about it. That would put my job at risk. My parents are nice, but don't get it. My professors are out of touch. And my manager, honestly, I love her or I love him, but she just doesn't have time for this. So I'm just trying to figure out kind of what to do next. And what they didn't say, but what they were implying was, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life now. Right. And so we started doing, I started doing kind of career coaching / life coaching for folks. And I realized just how many people were in the same spot as people that were calling me. There's so many people, If you were born in like 1980 to 89, you would stay in your job for like 4 to 5 years. If you were born in the 90s, you would be having this conversation 2 to 3 years in. Just like I did in advertising, where I realized, oh, I get how this goes. I get if I keep plugging my time here at a global firm, I have 2 choices, right? Number one is I'm going to become a global partner. That's the track. Or I'm going to start my own agency. That's the track. And I realized when I looked up the top of the ladder, I went, like, I don't know if I, for lack of a better word, am passionate enough or care enough really to commit myself to landing in one of those 2 places. And I realized that my experience was really similar to the experience that those around me were having. And they didn't know where to go. So I started coaching people, something that was really natural, really intuitive, and getting them to like really start thinking about what makes them tick. What motivates them to get out of bed in the morning? Why do they go into an office besides the basics of health insurance and benefits and all that stuff? Your salary, why do they wake up? So Talent Catalyst was born out of a coaching practice all the way back into 2010. It became an official business in 2013. And then we really moved into the millennial, like younger workforce space, more so in like 2016 is when we started taking that angle because all the marketing started coming out and all the articles and the research started coming out about, like this whole millennial generation and how it's kind of this generation, as Simon Sinek would put it, like there's a disconnect with this generation to others and they haven't been taught and accordingly aren't playing by the same rules as the generations in the workforce that came before them. And that's not good or bad, but it's definitely causing a gap and it's causing a ripple. And as a result, the workforce is shifting very dramatically. And so we realize that there's a need in the market to help educate folks on kind of the rules and let them grapple with that and figure out how they want to play. And then within the millennial generation, there's a need for them to figure out, purpose, meaning, impact, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. As I'm listening to you here, I really feel like there's a couple of directions that we can go now with this interview because I love the way that you started as looking at career transition. And then, of course, this millennial conversation is just all the buzz right now and everything to talk about. I really think that we want to stick with kind of this career transition because I'm super fascinated by it and super interested in asking you a bunch of questions about how you did it. And my first big question is, as you jump into this, you're coming from advertising. Did you have any real background in career change other than, you had kind of bounced around to a bunch of different accounts yourself, but it was all within one industry as far as advertising? And then the second question is, I would imagine that a lot of your coaching clients were peers of yours or, equivalent in age, colleagues maybe. And how did you establish credibility and say, look, listen to me, I got this thing figured out?
Well, to answer your first question, no, I had no professional experience at least, in career coaching or life coaching or just this transition, switching careers. I had experience switching within the industry, but that was kind of the culture of the industry, still is. If you want to pay increase, if you want to title change, this is not uncommon for people to switch agencies at all. Industry kind of breeds that behavior. But in terms of career transition, no.
Well, then what gave you kind of the background to, or the confidence to basically step out and say, hey, look, I think I can help you. I don't have any formal background training, but I'm pretty intuitive. I'm a smart gal. I think that I can figure this out. What gave you that confidence?
Yeah, so a couple things are important to note here. One is I went back to grad school and I studied organizational behavior. And within that, I studied leadership and how leadership works in organizations. Part of that track was coaching. So I didn't take a formal course in it. I did later on after grad school. I went to a coaching certification school and all that once I realized it was a trajectory for me. But I got my hands wet a little bit in coaching and went, wow, this is so innate. This is so natural that this is going to be in my future somewhere. I don't know how. I don't know if it's going to be full-time, part-time. I have no idea, but I want to have this in my back pocket for a number of reasons. Number one, it allows me flexibility. I can do it from wherever I want. Number two, I'm naturally good at it. And number three, it's an industry that's growing. It's blowing up over time. And I foresee in the workplace, as we're talking about talent catalysts, I see coaching just becoming the standard within the workplace.
And I would agree with you on that one because, if you look back in the 80s and in the 90s, kind of getting a coach, as far as if you were an executive and you brought in a coach, a life coach, it was kind of seen as maybe you didn't know what you were doing, lacking in confidence, or even a little bit soft for an executive to do that. Now you look fast forward to today and it's commonplace. I mean, executives have coaches for almost every aspect of their career because you can't be a leader. You can't be an expert in every leadership aspect, but you can be good and you can understand where your team is coming from. So I would absolutely agree with you on that. The trajectory is amazing. So as you start out doing this, you've got new clients that are, they're kind of taking a chance on you. How did you kind of refine that skill? How did you convince them that, hey, I think I can help you?
Well, it was, so I wanted practice, and I was working with a coach that said, Mala, that's it. Like, I'm not going to work with you anymore. She ran a consulting company for group dynamics and team dynamics work, largely with military accounts, based in San Diego. So that makes sense, right? Naval accounts. So she just said, she said, until you go get a client, I'm not going to work with you anymore, basically. So she said, I don't care what you charge. I don't care. Like, you need to charge something, right? Because you get what you pay for. And people don't value things they don't pay for. And I believe that to be true, actually. And so she, even if it's $1, right? 99 cents, whatever it is. And so that's what happened. So I started just asking around about people that were in this place where they were trying to figure out how they were going to transition out of undergrad, or they were in their entry level job and trying to make a transition out and figure things out. And turns out there are plenty of people that would pay me $10 an hour, $12 an hour just to have conversations. And it was a win-win because I got practice. And you know what? Coaching is about, you don't have to be an expert to coach. That's the point, is that coaches aren't the experts. They're not the consultant, right? Coaches facilitate a conversation. Coaches are question experts, in my opinion. They know how to ask good questions, but coaches don't do the work. Coaches don't do the solving. So I started practicing questions. And I started practicing having conversations. And that's all when it comes to transitions and people solving things, they need someone to process with, right? They need questions that'll pop them out of their current context and into a different or new one so they can see whatever problem they've been staring at through a new lens. That's half the battle, right? Just seeing it. If you're seeing everything in purple, what happens when you see it in green? Or blue? Oh, all of a sudden I have a whole new set of questions for myself. I have a whole new set of perspectives. Or perspectives. So I just realized that there was so much value to be gained for people just by talking and just by answering questions.
Well, this is a very fascinating conversation because, I'm thinking about how the world has transitioned. And as we've gone more social, and I'm talking, social media here, we've gotten less social as far as face-to-face or human-to-human interaction and conversations. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, people just need someone that can sit down, listen to what they're saying. And one of the things that you said earlier in the podcast that really resonated with me is, who do these coaching clients have? Who else do they have to turn to? You can't turn to your boss because you don't want to affect your employment status. You can't turn to your parents or your colleagues, your friends that all have different backgrounds and aspects. Who can you trust to really sit down and listen to what you are saying? And I love this idea of asking questions. Coaches are question experts. So Mala, how do you become a question expert?
One thing that I started doing was I started working with a coach, and my practice is that my theory, I should say, is that I don't coach people unless I'm working with the coach, because when I work with the coach, I learn from the best. I learn from the question experts, and different coaches ask different questions. And so it's years of listening to people's questions. Also, other experts that I feel are masterful with questions are therapists. They're really good with questions. And I spent some time with some therapists unexpectedly, and it was a very powerful experience for me to see how their questions differ a little bit from coaches' questions. And I think my favorite world to live in is both of those worlds, like a hybrid, where, therapist questions are really designed to heal. That's their job. Coaches' questions are designed to increase performance in people. That's their job, just because coaching is rooted in athletics. Therapy is rooted in medicine. So not to go on a tangent there, but I think listening to questions helped me discover questions. And then reading interviews and listening to podcasts, right? Like podcasts like yourself, Jake, great with questions. So I think I've had a fascination. Once I realized that the power in coaching and working with great coaches is in their questions, I became fascinated with questions. So I just started listening for them and reading them.
And you talk a little bit about athletics. And one of the things that popped into my mind is, when you see an athlete, and I grew up playing a lot of sports, and sometimes when you'd get knocked down, and I played ice hockey, so I was constantly falling on the ice and getting bumped into the wall. And the coach would always say, kind of walk it off, get up, walk it off, kind of stretch it out a little bit. And I think the same thing is you're talking about coaching and questioning here. And that is, get in the game, kind of walk it off, kind of ask questions. If you ask a dumb question, walk it off. It's okay. You're going to ask plenty more questions. And the more you ask, the more good questions that you're going to get. Everybody's going to ask something dumb, but it doesn't matter because you're going to vastly overwhelm it with the good questions that you're asking. And so I love that. Now you're into this coaching. And the first question that you're getting, and a lot of questions end up being a lot of the same. A lot of your clients end up asking the same thing. And they're saying, okay, I set out on a trajectory in life. I went to law school. I went to medical school. I went to dental school. I went to graduate school. I find myself in advertising on New York. I'm living the life that everybody thinks I should be living, but inside I don't feel it. And so, maybe I'm going through the same thing. I don't feel it. What would you say to me as I ask you that question, or as I kind of spill my guts to you as far as what's going on internally?
Well, one thing to note is when I was talking to these folks, and I still do, most of them are coming out of undergraduate school, right? So they just got their first job, and they got a good one. Like they got one as a result of their major that they picked, and their track fed into this field or this industry, and like advertising or media. And so they got a good job. Like they did their job to share your energy that you were sharing with me. They're proud of where they landed, right? And then they get there and realize, oh, wait a minute. Like, okay, this isn't all bad, but in my experience, what feeling I felt was, wow, this is fun, da 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 da. But Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, wait a minute, like where does this lead? And then the other feeling I felt was, I feel like this uses 50% of me, of who I am. Now I can go through, and I'm spending a lot of time here. Like more time is being spent here than anywhere else. So that means if I'm spending time here, turns out my life now. This isn't like a side project, or this isn't school. This is my life, because I'm spending the most of my time here versus spending it with my friends or spending it on my hobbies or spending it with my family. So hold on, like I got to figure this out. And that was a huge epiphany for me to get that. So when I realized just the emotional weight what that feels like when you realize, holy smokes, this is the track for my life, everything changes. So what people would come to me with is they'd have that similar feeling. And then they would go, two things would come up. One, they go, maybe I think I'm going to go to business school, or I think I'm going to go to law school. And those are the two like classic conclusions.
And since I did both, it fits in really good with this conversation.
And so I am a fan of business school and I'm a fan of law school. So please take this in the right vein. But I went, wait a minute, like that's a lot of time, and that's usually a lot of debt for people. So let's make sure that if you're going to invest in either one of those tracks, that it is indeed the track for you, so that you don't have the same experience that you're having right now out of undergraduate school. Are there any guarantees that you get it right all the time? No. Right. But so that's something that has to be like figured out. It's like, wait a minute, do I want to make this kind of investment? So then backing up to your question about, well, then what do you feel and where are you supposed to look? That was your question, right?
Well, it's kind of getting clarity on what you want to do. And I think that we're kind of down that path right now.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah. So how I got clarity, Jake, was I remember out of undergraduate school, like I had a yellow piece of paper with me and I was on an airplane. And I still do this to this day when I need to get clarity on things. I took that piece of paper and I wrote down everything that I naturally connected with that I studied, right? I wrote down, and that's your memory will tell you that. If you naturally connected with something, you don't forget it, I find. I don't forget the author's name. I maybe will forget the quotes because my memory just isn't as amazing as other people's, but I remember the author and I remember the feeling and I remember the main subjects and I remember pieces of their content or their work that I really connected to. So I wrote those all down. I remember on this piece of paper, I wrote down professors that I connected with, authors, papers, classes, essays, maybe if I had a quote that I remembered, yeah. And then I would write down friends, right? And like in conversations that we had that stood out to me. And I would just look for that, right? I just dumped everything out on that yellow piece of paper. And it was with a pencil. I remember it. And I took a picture of it because I knew I would want to remember it. So, and then I would look at everything I wrote down and I would look for themes and patterns in what I wrote down and I have that piece of paper still because the themes or patterns revealed who I was, is what I was realizing. Like when I would circle things, I went, oh no, that's Mala. Like that's me. So whether I like it or not, that is me because these things stick and they feel like me. And what I realized was people who really loved what they did every day, what they were doing and who they were, there wasn't a big gap in between those two things, right? They would show up and be themselves and they would produce powerful work as a result. So my game after undergraduate school became, and this is when I started coaching, became how can I find things? If I want to do work I love, I need to figure out who I naturally am. Like who am I inside, and what things come really innately to me. So that's when speaking all of a sudden showed up on my radar. It didn't show up in undergrad because I didn't frame it up that way, right? But I went, whoa. Okay, speaking turns out really innate, really natural. Questions, really innate, really natural. Okay, got it. Is this making sense?
Yeah. This to me, Mala, is your back of the napkin business plan. You know, that all great businesses can trace their origins back to this. You know, I was in a coffee shop or I was in a pizza shop and I wrote my business plan on a napkin. This yellow piece of paper is your back of the napkin. This is your business plan. It's how everything became clear to you. And I love that you can trace the origin to this moment.
Yeah, I have that paper and I took it and I'll show it in keynotes and whatnot because I really believed then and I believe now that when people understand what makes them innately tick, meaning like, KPIs for technology, right? Like key performance indicators. I love thinking about it as KPIs for humans. Like what do you need to perform at your highest levels every day? And I don't care how ridiculous the answers are. I don't care at all. Like, do you need fresh air? Do you need lights? Do you need a team? Like, do you work really well with people? Do you need to be alone and then go be with a team? Do you need color? Do you need energy? Do you need music? What do you need to show up at your 100%? If you know that and can tell an HR leader that, wow. Like what a gift, right? The HR leader can't guarantee that they're going to give you all that. Your manager can't do that either. Let's just talk about managers. But they get to know you a lot better, right? And they want to do everything they can because it's in their best interest for you to show up at 100% every day on their team. So when I tell millennials, it's like, millennials, it's not your manager's job to figure this out. It's yours, right? Don't blame it on your manager. Figure it out. Like figure out, like look at your past, look at your current, your present, right? And figure out when you're like really showing up at 100, what is in your environment? Like what's in your place for you? And that can show you so much about how you're going to thrive, like what types of careers you're going to thrive in.
And I love this conversation, but I got to stop you. You know why? We're running out of time and I still have to ask you one question. And this is the question. And it's going to be a little bit of a difficult curveball for you, maybe. But okay. Parents in the past, like my parents and a lot of parents of, and I'm not a millennial, by the way, I'm at the very end of Gen X, but a lot of parents through the end of Gen X and into millennials were really trying to give their kids a lot of good, happy experiences, try to take away some of the heartache and pain, give them kind of a leg up. And one of the things that I think happened is our parents told us, hey, go to college, have a great experience. This will be the best years of your life. Go have fun. And when you get out of school, then, you're ready for the real world. You've kind of had your coming of age experience. And I think what's happened is college has gone from 4 years a degree to 6 years now because people are spending too much time trying to find themselves. And so now as I look at it as a parent myself and I'm raising my kids, I don't want to teach my kids to go away to college and spend 6 years finding themselves. What I'd rather them do is spend 4 years, kind of figure it out, dial it in, and get ready for not necessarily the real world, because I want them to enjoy life. I don't want them to just, head down in the basement of a law library. I want them to know what they want to do, but I don't want them to spend 6 years doing it. Or if they do spend 6 years, I want them to do it in high school. So what can I do as a parent now to kind of help my kids, encourage my kids to explore what they're passionate about, what really lights them up, so that they can get a jump start that way?
Have conversations. Have as many of them as you can with people that are living their lives and in the workplace before you get to college. Like, get curious. Like, if your uncle's a dentist, why do you choose to be a dentist? What is being a dentist like? Where does he live? What zip code does he live in? Right? Like, how many hours a week does he work? Right? These kinds of things, like, what does he love about being a dentist? What does he hate about being a dentist? What's kind of boring and what's really exciting? If he could do it all over again, would he be a dentist? Right? Like, I would have conversations, and I would also encourage your kids to, like, take note of who they relate to. One thing we say at Talent Catalyst is, like, find your people first, because and then your subject or your job second. If you can find your people, you'll find your job. And if you can find your job, you'll find your career, et cetera. Right? So, like, who do you naturally, like, attract, and who do you hang out with? Right? Like, what kind of personalities are they? And then, like, who's your favorite uncle? Or who's your favorite, like, do you have a mentor? Like, who's your favorite baseball coach or sports coach or whatever? Why? What are they like? Right? Because if you can figure out, like, what these people are like, you can see where they'll thrive, like what kind of industries, what kind of professions attract those kind of people.
And I think this is a game changer for our kids and for parents that are listening to this podcast. I really think that you're onto something here. And what I hear you saying is expand the universe of our kids. You see, I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood where everybody that was on the street, all the adults that I interacted with, whether it was through church or through, just interactions with families on the street, they all had the same kind of background, the same kind of educational experience, the same kind of careers. They might have been a little bit different, but essentially the same. And what I hear you saying is give our kids the opportunity to explore outside of that. And I got to tell you just a quick fun story. So my 12-year-old at school had an assignment to research a career that she was interested in and write about this. And my daughter has always wanted to be an author. She loves to write. She loves to read. And over the last year, she wrote an 80,000 word book herself. She's 11 years old at the time, and 80,000 words is the equivalent of Harry Potter, the first Harry Potter book. I mean, this is a big book.
Congratulations. Yeah.
When it came time to write this report, she has been in this writing world for so long. That was her first inclination. Hey, let me write about being a writer. But I encouraged her, hey, what else are you interested in? And she took some time, and I love this. It tickles my heart to hear this, but she decided that she wanted to research being a nanotechnology engineer. And I loved it because it was so contrasting to the writer and this, but it gave her experience to say, okay, this is what I like about writing and I don't like. This is what I like about nanotechnology engineering, and this is what I don't like. And I think that's what I hear you saying, Mala.
Yeah, be curious. Have as many conversations as you can. And the other thing I would say is that, our kids are growing up to be global citizens. So talk to people in different countries, right? Like Skype, get on FaceTime, like we can all connect. And so the more we know about what's going on, not just in our own country, but in the world, the broader that net gets. And the broader the net, the broader the choice, right? And so I think the more choices, the better. And I think you can narrow from there. But your daughter, what's great about her writing is go study the nanotechnology, right? And then write about it. Like, because writing is the way your daughter processes, clearly, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, like, go study it, and then you can write about it. Wow, now you just got the best of your worlds. Now you got them both. So I think kids need to realize that they can have millennials. They want it all, right? They want everything, and I think your career path doesn't have to be. Just because you choose it, it doesn't have to be your only world. It doesn't have to be an either or context, which is what I viewed advertising as. I'm either in advertising or I don't have my life, right? It's like, well, not necessarily. Like, can it be a both and? So can your daughter get her hand in science and liberal arts? Can she do that? And I say yes.
Not only that, I think it probably gives her a leg up. It differentiates her from everybody who's just one dimensional. Mala, this is a fascinating conversation. I look at our time and we are running short on it. We need to skip on to the next section, and that is our learning from leaders. My favorite part, where we add a little personality to the business conversation that we've had and kind of dive into what you're doing, what you're reading, what you're watching. So are you ready for learning from leaders?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. How about the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table?
Ooh, most recently I've been reading 3 books. One is No Ego by Cy Wakeman, fabulous former therapist, helping transform management. And it's fascinating to see her apply what she's learned in therapy to the corporate world, because we need it so badly. Another one, I just read a classic, Braving the Wilderness, Brené Brown, of course. You just can't beat her. I absolutely love her work on vulnerability and shame. And then the third one is on habits. I think it's Better, Faster, Stronger. It's on productivity.
Yeah. Charles Duhigg, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful book.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and the last one I'm reading, Jake, is Shoe Dog. I'm listening to it.
That's the Phil Knight story about...
I can't put it down.
Yeah, I understand. That's a great one. I'm going to have to pick it up. How about the best movie ever made?
Ooh, that's hard. A movie that I absolutely love, maybe it's because of the human transformation story in it, is Shawshank Redemption. For whatever reason, I know that's about as deep and heavy as it gets, but it goes back to the yellow piece of paper. I would write that one down every time.
And probably the most recommended movie on the podcast, if you'd believe it. How about your leadership superpower?
I'd say conversations, the ability to have a focused conversation.
And I would agree with that. Just in the time that we've spent together, absolutely fascinating. How about the best book ever written? How about we finish up with that?
I'd go with Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah, I think that's the place to start.
Yeah.
It's the place where all books flow from, that book. Yeah.
No, I would absolutely agree. Mala, before we let you go today, last bit of advice. How about a leadership mantra that you live by? And then how do we connect more with you, find out more about Talent Catalyst?
Yeah, absolutely. My mantra is, this one's been near and dear to me for years since I started coaching, which is, why be fine when you can be fabulous? And just remembering that we don't use that at Talent Catalyst every day, but I use it because what I would get is folks coming to me saying, hey, how's work? Like, how's it going? They're like, it's fine. How's life? Well, it's fine. And nobody wakes up on a Monday to be fine. Nobody wants to be fine. Nobody aspires to be fine because there's a fabulous in all of us. And it's just a matter of acknowledging that and harnessing it to come to work with us every day and come to life with us every day. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love it. And how about connecting with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is thetalentcatalyst.com. We'd love to have you join us and welcome us. We host webinars every month, and we're starting up podcasting here in 2018. So you can find us on our website. You can find us on our social media. Our Instagram is My Talent Catalyst. We have a Facebook page, which is Talent Catalyst. And then you can reach us if you have questions based on this podcast. You can email us at info@thetalentcatalyst. That's info@thetalentcatalyst.com. And we are happy to answer you within 24 hours there. We'd love to have a conversation.
Oh, that sounds great. And we're going to link all of that up on the show notes to this episode so that they will know to get everything. Mala, I can't thank you enough for spending the time this early Monday morning with us. Thank you for all you do. You're awesome.
All right, Jake, right back at you. Thank you. And thanks again. Loved it.
All right, my friends, I told you had to slow it down, right? Mala is a bundle of energy. I just love talking with her. We've had a number of conversations. She's kind of helped me with some of the formatting and formula for my direction, and I've kind of helped her with her business and background, and we've developed a great friendship. So it's great to have her on the show and really talk about her background, dive into how we, each of us, can kind of gain clarity on what we want to do with our lives. And it doesn't mean that if you're in your 30s, you're stuck, or if you're in your 40s, you have to keep doing what you're doing. It doesn't mean if you're in your 20s that you need to shake it up. Really, it's identifying where your true north is, where your direction, what really resonates with you, and really going after it. I pulled out 5 things from this podcast that I think I want to bring back and circle with you. The first one is Mala talked about tough love. Her coach basically said, look, you're going to go get a coach, or you're going to go get a client, or I'm going to stop coaching you. And sometimes we need that push in the right direction. The second thing she talked about is you value what you pay for. If you're not willing to pay for coaching, you're not valuing it. And if you're not willing to put money towards your personal development, then it's not important to you. You value what you pay for. And on the flip side, if you're offering a service, don't offer it for free. You should be charging, because people will value you and your service for what they pay for it. The third thing is she says she worked with a coach. It doesn't matter where you're at in your game. No matter how good you are, no matter how elite or expertise you are, have a coach. Find an area of your career, of your life, of your success and goal achievement that you can work on and go after it. She talked about curiosity. Be curious. The best way to find clarity and follow your true path is to be clear and be curious about what's going on. I love that story of my daughter. Of course, any chance I get to brag on my daughter, I love it. But be curious about different things. Maybe at the end of this, she hates nanotechnology. That's okay. At least she explored it and she knows that. Eliminate the alternatives. And the final thing, Mala talked about finding out who she naturally is, what resonates, what's innate inside her, what comes naturally. Find that for yourself, because once you get dialed into what is innate with you, what comes naturally to you, you will be an expert in your field. You will have the passion and the energy to do what it takes to get to the top and really make things awesome. And so with that, I'm going to let you go for today. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the podcast, which happens to be episode 59. Of course, everything we talked about, the show notes, the quotes, the books, the links, everything can be found jakeacarlson.com/ML59 for episode 59. And until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life, and of course, stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.